I'm Zahra Almajidi. I am a visual artist, digital maker, educator, raised and based in Detroit, Michigan. I was mostly working with jewelry or making jewelry, but I was also thinking of how to develop a more versatile art style, so thinking of how to make beyond the studio. While I didn't necessarily grow up with these objects around me, I'm able to recognize references to them in how I grew up. It's an interesting thing to kind of make work about something that you've never experienced, but also my parents had experienced this very personally, and I would show images to my mom of things. I'm like, do you remember this? She's like, yeah, this is how we grew up. These are how our homes looked and stuff. And thinking of the crafted objects that I am referencing, and even just the jewelry pieces. In my research on the rugs, I kept seeing listings on Etsy and eBay, and I was like, oh, this is really weird. But I found one on eBay that was affordable enough that I could purchase it. And there was just something about being able to reclaim the object that was that really mattered to me. The history behind these rugs are these are often wedding rugs. So two families come together and they agree on patterns and styles for the rugs, and then they're stitched down the center as they come together. And most of the time the rugs are just referencing plants and animals. So you see camels, there are instances of lizards, flowers. Sometimes they reference the architecture. So sometimes you'll see rugs with mosques and houses on there. I was literally just looking at image after image after image of these rugs and pulling shapes out. At first I started just working with the simple forms, and then once I got those cut out and colored, I would then start making patterns and new shapes and trying to reimagine these rugs. I wasn't really interested in replicating the rugs because that's not my intention. I was more so interested in taking from the forms and evolving it and kind of raising awareness of it, but also paying respect and homage to them. So a lot of the colors I use in my work are derived from those rugs, and the shapes I'm using are all kind of borrowing from the language of a rug. I'd like to think so, especially because objects are often the only things that remain when cultures, I hate to say cease to exist, but they're displaced and people become borderless, and once they're forced to leave their homes, objects are often the only things that they keep with them, and those are the connections they keep their culture. And it becomes a thing where those objects are used to understand cultures and places that once existed. Working with the museum has been really great because I was able to kind of rethink my making. One great thing that this residency has done was allow me to kind of forge a closer connection with my culture, and not even just Iraqi culture, but just Arab American culture. And I'm very sentimental about objects, and I have a very hard time letting go of things. I was able to see that and recognize that in the people who were participating in the workshop, pulling things that they hadn't either hadn't touched for years or hadn't looked at for years, and being able to hear their connection to the objects and how working with the objects had allowed them to kind of develop a closer bond to the person that gave them the object was just really beautiful to see. As time progresses, we see more and more people being displaced, and what happens is once they move to a new space, over time they begin to adopt kind of I guess a new culture, whatever culture they're moving into. And so it becomes this thing where it's a hyphenated culture, or whether it's intentional or not, and whether they want to or not, they become this almost, I hate to say new person, but it's this new category of being. And as I see it, the more that happens, people try to cling on to the past and they try to hold on to the things that are lost. And as I see with like a lot of, at least Arab American artists, like referencing those things in their work and trying to bring those things to light and trying to bring those things more into their work and raise awareness of it and try to like almost recreate those things, but with their own kind of like, through their perspective of being a displaced person. There's something about wearable objects that's just very special because, yes, it's an art piece, but it's also like an expression of one's identity or maybe like personality. It's a sign for some people. There's a lot of intimacy that happens because of how close the object is held to your body.